Hey, welcome back to my channel, everybody. I'm actually going to do a video today based off of a viewer request. They wanted to know how I start a fire in my 500-gallon offset smoker. And it's usually going to be one of two ways. I either use tumbleweeds or I use a torch, but it's actually a weed burner. You can pick them up for around $50 at your hardware store. It just hooks up to a propane tank. Between the two ways that I do it, I tend to lean towards using these tumbleweeds or any fire starter you have access to. Preferably not one that's going to leave a chemical taste. I know they sell these little wood sticks, but they're basically soaked in fire starter, and just not my thing. But the reason I tend to go with tumbleweeds, which these are the brand I'm using today, or Royal Oak, and these can also be picked up at pretty much anywhere. But the reason I use these is because the torch is actually pretty noisy. And when you're trying to light it with the torch, and I'm sure you've seen other videos, I'm not going to do that method today. A lot of the guys will tend to just leave it sitting somewhere like along this lip here, like pointing in. And what happens with that is the torch is extremely loud if you've never heard one. I don't think it would show up so well on the video, but the torch in itself is loud. And then when you put it inside of a hollow tube such as this, it just turns into an echo chamber. And to top it off, if you watch my earlier video on maintenance that I do with smokers, I had hit upon that when I start my fires, I do it with the doors open and the smokestack open. So that noise just shoots through there like a turbine. And if I'm doing a cook and I'm in a residential area or at home, for example, like we are today, the torch can just be annoying for the neighbors around you. And if you think about it, if you're doing a brisket cook or if you're doing something that's going to be all day, you tend to start either really early in the morning or you start really late at night. And I just don't want anyone to complain. So I tend to lean towards using the tumbleweeds. Now, the one thing with using the tumbleweeds is you have to consider the wood. So it has to be your drier pieces, and even with that, you have to take and use your split down even further. For example, I might cook with something this size here, and it's a larger split. Depending on what point I am in the cook, this would be a good piece for heat, not necessarily quick heat, but more of like longevity. It's a thicker piece of wood, but this would not start very well with these tumbleweeds. So what I do is I'll take a log like that, particularly one of my drier ones, and then I split them down, so something smaller, like this. And I will go ahead and light these, and the benefit to this is that it does catch quicker, since it is a smaller split. So I do get a coal bed going faster than I would with larger pieces. And for me anyway, I find that it helps where I can kind of get cooking a little quicker. It's not necessarily going to be the coal bed that you're establishing for the cook itself. It does produce heat, but what it helps with is igniting the next logs that you will be using, appropriately sized for the cook that you're doing. And that cuts down on dirty smoke going through the chamber. Also, with them being smaller, the coals establish quicker. Again, makes it faster for me to be able to shut these doors. So with that said, I will go ahead and get this started. For today's cook, sorry about that, I have 3 tumbleweeds. I tend to put 2 in the front like I have right here. And you'll also notice that I have it set up in that log cabin structure with the airflow. I always start with the logs going in the direction that they're in right now. Because of the curvature of my chamber, it creates an air gap. So it allows for air to go towards the smokestack, which maybe been able to see in some previous videos. I'm going to try to catch it in this one. It will pull the fire towards the opening back there, the throat, which will just help burn the logs quicker. So I start with 2 in the front and then 1 in the back, and then I'll try to light the one in the back first, so that, well, maybe just so that I don't have to reach over fire to get to it. Yeah, there we go. And then I'll hit these up. And then I did leave them kind of half in, half out, mostly so that I could hit the edges of the middle logs and then also the bottom. Another thing I do when I'm stacking the wood is I try to have at least on the bottom the bigger pieces and two pieces that are going to be more equal in size, and then as you work your way from the bottom row up to the top row I tend to make smaller. I find that for me they will burn quicker, obviously with them being smaller, but then it kind of showers down into the other logs there and helps them continue to burn down. So as you can see, it actually starts pretty quick here. Again, it's smaller logs and they are my drier ones. I would use the torch if I were using maybe not as seasoned logs, or if I wanted to start with larger logs than this. So we'll let this go for a few minutes. You can see the smoke kind of just isn't really drafting or going in any direction, mostly just because there's no heat established and I have the doors open. But that's the kind of smoke right there that I want to avoid going into the chimney, or through the cooker period, because this is that dirty smoke, and it's kind of like your fireplace smoke where it will cause creosote, and I don't want to have creosote built up on the walls because, for one, it's a carcinogen, and two, it just catches fire easy, and we got to try to be safe as we can when we're working with fire. So I'm gonna let this go for a couple minutes and we'll cut back in and see how it looks. All right, so we've had about 5 minutes or so, and as you can see, fire's moving pretty good. You see kind of a little bit of smoke coming out of the door here, which is kind of why I wanted to show you, and I hope it comes up on camera, but this is why I leave the doors open, is that, sorry, there's quite a bit of smoke that comes in and out of here, and right now it's not so bad because that fire is burning so good, but before it had gotten to that point and I didn't get to the camera quick enough, there was quite a bit of smoke that was barreling out of there. At this point, with it started so well, I'll go ahead and shut the doors so I can start it drafting and pulling those flames towards the back logs a little more, and also bringing the smoker up to temp. I'm not going to attach a cooking video to this video today. It's just going to be managing the fire, but since I have the fire going, we're actually going to have some smoked chicken wings, and I'll put that into a separate video if you guys feel like you'd want to watch. So let's see where we're at now. Yeah, it's starting to come down now. Those upper logs are burning down, as you can see, and dropping to the bottom a little bit there. So we'll get back to you guys here in a few more minutes after this burns down, and I'll show you what I do to manage temperatures and adding a log. I just wanted to cut in real quick and mention something else that I do, because I kind of forgot with the filming and everything. It's only been about a minute here or so, but I'll typically put a log like this just somewhere, either here in the corner like that, just to let it get a little extra heat, so that while we're in this process, that next log will fire up real quick. I may have to reopen the doors because this is quite a bit of smoke coming out now as this burns down. I think the wood was a little bit wetter than I normally would have liked. I could tell by the popping. Yeah, that's too much smoke. I don't like that much smoke popping going through the smoker. Yeah, that's a lot, and it'll just build up on it anyway. So let me get back to it, and we'll come back in when we have some coals. All right, it's been about another 5 to 10 minutes or so, so I kind of want to show you what I've done here. One of the logs in the back did fall down. As you can see, we have a hot fire going, so what I've done is I have closed the door down and rearranged the logs so that the one that was in the front that didn't look like it was burning as much is now in the back, and one is sitting right here getting ready to go on here in a few more minutes once a couple more of those logs burn and drop down in there. And now from here on out, they'll all catch a little bit faster and much easier because we have hot embers that is constantly feeding heat to the new logs as they go in. So I will come back when I go to put that log here onto the fire and kind of show you where we're running. Right now I have closed down the doors since we have a decent fire going. We have a little bit of smoke coming out. It's not terrible, which is why I leave the doors open. But as you can tell, we're only at about 150 at the front. That's gonna be because I just shut the door right before I started filming. So a lot of the heat hasn't made its way through there yet. In the middle, we're almost at 150, and back here, almost at 150. So we're actually running pretty even. Because of that, let me hop up here and see how we're doing on top. So the closest to the smokestack, in this top corner, we're just a little above 150. So that might be a hot zone. Might have a little bit more to do with the way I have the trailer as well. We're a little above 150 here. And we're getting closer to 175 here, but this again is right by the firebox. So not too bad across the top. And speaking of with starting fires and the heat and whatnot, I didn't have it set up for the video to show you, but one of the things that I do is I'll put a level across the top, usually right in through here or so. The reason I do that, and I do that every time I move the trailer, is because I want the nose of it, this is what I would consider the nose where the smokestack is, to be just above level, particularly when starting the fire, mostly due to the fact that heat goes up. So I want it to pull the heat up that way. And when I have the fire started, I will typically lower it down to pretty much level. That way you can get your even cooking across your grates. Also, not that it's really a concern with this particular setup, at least I don't see it being as one, but in some setups, what can happen is if you're angled too far up on the nose, if you have enough grease in the bottom from enough cooks, what'll happen is that heats up, it's gonna liquefy that grease and it's gonna pull it towards the fire, and you can end up with a grease fire inside of here, and you don't want that. So like I said, mostly just for the beginning of the startup, and to get the heat going that way towards the nose there, so I can get good convection going and help the fire along, I will tilt the nose up, and I just use a 4-foot level for that. We'll get back to you guys here when it's time to add that log. So the bottom front log has actually just dropped down, I'll show you here, and has created it where that's going to be part of our first part of the cold bed. I hope you can see the glow. Also, if you notice that log to the right, I did end up having to add it. I wasn't able to get it on video. I tried, but more or less just so I could get this structure back up, which brings me to a point I'd forgotten about. You need to try to leave some air gaps in here as best as you can. If they get too close together, even this hot right now, it will put one of the logs out and you'll get a ton of extra smoke. That's why we got a little bit of this extra smoke right here, is because they had fallen together and I had to add that to give it balance. But this would be normally, I wouldn't have to add that other log, but it was just the way that it collapsed. I couldn't get everything back together the right way. So this is where we're at. Typically this would be the time that I would add the next log, and the way that I tend to do it is I like to put the newer log on front first, like so. See, even that right there, like that gap I'm talking about, isn't very big, so it's going to be tough for it to be a fire right there. So what I'll have to end up doing is grabbing the shovel, if I can do it one-handed, and see if we can just gap that just a little more, like so, and get some flames to come back up through there. But anyway, what I'll do is I tend to feed the new logs on the front, the way that I'm doing right there. And then what'll happen is when I go to add the next one, I'll take this log and roll it backwards. For the first couple of times, in a perfect world, I'd like to actually be able to add the new logs further back, just because if this log is already caught, it does pull the fire in that direction towards the throat, and it would help a newer log start quicker. But once you have a pretty established coal bed, that doesn't really tend to be an issue. So mostly the reason I tend to add it to the front is, for one, it'll catch you there just fine. And for two, you don't want to reach across the fire. I suppose if you had fireplace utensils, I don't have a fireplace, you know, living in Florida, we don't tend to have fireplaces, so never really went out and got anything to pick up logs with, but using the shovel here. So but anyway, if I put it to the front, I end up not burning my hands and my arms, so I tend to do that. And then, like I said, I just continue the rotation. The next time around, because we're probably just another minute or so away from that back horizontal log collapsing, the next logs that I'll end up putting on are going to end up being vertical or in line with the smoker. And you tend to just repeat that pattern, because from here on out, it will be the bottom logs that burn down first. So whatever way they were, that's going to be the new way that you have to add logs. And then at some point, if it's a long enough cook, you're going to end up with quite a coal bed in the bottom. And at that point, it's going to be more or less, you're just going to be adding one split or two splits, depending on the temperatures you're running at. And it'll mostly just be, whatever way you can do that gives you the most space. You try to move ash and things around and get it out of the way, try to keep a good airflow, but eventually you're going to have a solid coal base at the bottom, and air's not going to make it through the bottom anyway. So you're going to want to just space them out so that you do have that fire. And as you can see, that log is already caught, even though I don't have a complete base of coals yet, but the logs underneath are basically coal. They're just barely holding their structure together as it is. And you can kind of still see, I'm not going to mess with it just because I don't want my my cabin or my lattice here to fall. But if you look at these two here in the front that got a little close together, we don't have a ton of flames right there, just because the air isn't passing through very good. All right, so I will get back with you guys next time we needed to add a log, and see if I can catch it where I can show you where I roll that log back and add a new one to the front. I'll talk to you guys in a few. All right, so I just heard the logs fall over, which probably means that the rear log has collapsed, and it has. And actually did me a favor, because it slid that front log back anyway, but it did keep these two together. As I mentioned earlier, you know, this is not burning all the way down, and these are one of the first logs I'd put on because of how close together they've become. Sorry about that weird cut right there. My hand accidentally hit a button and stopped the camera. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and add this log here to the front, like so. All right, and see if we got enough spacing. All right, there we go. And you can already see the fire starting to come up in the back there. And we'll give this a few minutes here to catch. If you wanted, and you were gonna be doing a hot cook, you could, well, not necessarily a hot cook, but a hotter one than what I'm doing, because this is mostly just for the demonstration of the fire management here. You could go ahead and put your next two logs across the top, facing in line with the pit there, and they would catch too, and you'd get your coal bed established a little quicker. This is a little slower than what I usually do it at. Even with the tumbleweeds, it's not really the tumbleweeds that did it. It's more or less just that the wood was a little wetter. Also, I'm not really cooking anything today for this purpose of this video. So I'm gonna try to keep it smaller just to kind of give you a general idea. And hopefully I'll update it. Well, the plan is to update what I would do in terms of managing a fire for a larger cook, and also, or if I was cooking a brisket, or if I was cooking a really anything else other than wings. So today, just wings, and that's going to be in a separate video if you want to check that out. You can see I do have a small coal bed that has been established under there, and this will be putting off plenty of heat for what I'm using it for today, but you get the idea. Basically, I just bounce back and forth between flopping the logs horizontally and vertically, and it will build up a good base for you. And really, we haven't spent that much time doing this. I'm probably in total, I know the video is starting to run long and I didn't want it to do this, but overall I'm probably getting in about 30 minutes in, and not too bad. Like I said, larger scale. If this was going to be a bigger cook, I would have stacked it higher to begin with, and had more logs in there. The only thing I do a little different in terms of temperature control, you can control the temperature obviously by how big your fire is. But with this, as you can see, I kind of am in about, I'd say the first third, it's too much smoke for you guys. Oh, there you go. The first third of the cooker. I still have a pretty good amount of space right here. I mean, first third of the firebox, I'm sorry. But I've got a pretty much good amount of space right here if I wanted to. I could have started it here. And what I'll end up doing is I try to do it in the first third. And this is mostly just to conserve the wood, is that I need higher temperatures. I'll take the shovel as I have a more established coal base, and I'll push it closer to the pit if that's what I need. But for the most part, usually between here and maybe another 8 to 10 inches back is usually the sweet spot anyway. So yeah, this is pretty much the process just repeated over and over. The only slight difference, and I'll try to add it in here at the very end, since I am going to do wings in a separate video, I'll kind of show you what it looks like after we've established a little bit bigger of a bed. But if you were trying to get a bigger cook done and you didn't care about your neighbors, it is much quicker to use the torch. And with that, because you're using the torch and it is providing heat, it does end up heating up the cooker for you as well. And so that's also a time saver. But for me, I don't know, I just like playing with the fire and keeping the noise down. I will catch you guys in my next video and see if I can get a couple of shots here towards the end of the cook I'm going to start and show you what that looks like. All right, we are coming towards the end of the cook. Almost the end of the cook for the chicken wings, but this is for the fire management video. As you can see, I had mentioned earlier in the video that you'll end up with a pretty good sized bed of coals, where it really won't matter so much about the bottom logs and the curvature of the firebox, because the coals will stack up so much that you'll just end up putting them on top. But I still have them spaced out, as you can see. I did just add a log, probably the last, and I was able to actually rotate this one though with the shovel to bring the older one to the front, which is pretty well caught, and put the new one in the back. And since it's pulling the fire towards the throat, it'll help with that back one catching much quicker. Also, I'm not sure if you can tell, but I have managed to scoot the coal bed and the logs more towards the middle, and that's just because of the particular cook that I'm doing. Hope you enjoyed the video. I will try to do another one where either I use that torch, or I'm building a bigger fire for a larger cook. This one, I'm hoping you guys get the idea. It wasn't exactly perfect, and it took a little longer than I would have hoped, but I was also trying to do a small fire and not burn through a whole bunch of wood. So stay tuned for the next one. Thank you.